Not much. Just trying to get caught up on editing. Got late Muzz season coming up on the 22nd, I think. So got a lot of work to do so I can hopefully spend a lot of time in the woods during those.
Yeah,
Like,
I
I think it's
I meant
like
to try
an,
to get out for muzzleloader season, but never really I've had it in the back of my truck, just trying to find the time, but never really did around work and stuff. So,
yeah, yeah, I hear you.
um, yeah, there's a couple. I don't know how I feel about the holiday hunt late doe stuff. I mean, it's
Hmm.
just 2 months straight of rifles being able to be used in the woods, I guess.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
but you don't live in Wisconsin anymore, do you?
No, I'm right across in Iowa right now.
Okay. Is that foreseeable future? You kinda wanna stay in that spot, or what are your
Yeah,
plans
I
there?
mean, with being a resident over here, I mean, I'm probably an hour away from southeast Minnesota. I literally moved like 6 minutes across the river. So I still get to hunt all the stuff that I'm familiar with in Wisconsin, and it's, pretty close drive. So being able to hunt Iowa every year with a gun and a bow, and then hunt Wisconsin whenever I want. If I lucky enough to fill all those tags, I can run up to Minnesota if I want or go anywhere else. So
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, I'd love to move out west, but I don't know. I'm pretty close to my family, so it's kind of hard to leave. So Iowa's probably a good place to be, I guess.
Yeah, I'm fairly familiar with that area. I hunted Iowa a couple of years ago
Gotcha.
for the same reasons. I'm kinda not far from where you're at or Minnesota either, so it's kinda nice being that close that they're different states. You're right there. You can if you fill a tag, you can hop across the river, and that kinda triangle right there is kind of a really good place to be if you like the outdoors. There's so many things to
Yeah.
do with waterfowl. I don't waterfowl hunt too much myself. I have
Yep.
friends that do, but with that, you mean turkey hunting and in the spring through different
Hmm.
areas where turkey tags are not all that expensive. Um, being able to hunt that whole season, just be in the woods, shed hunt, different
Yep.
areas, just everything. There's so much
Yep.
going on. Um,
Yeah, I agree.
but yeah, I know you filled a couple tags this year. Um, that's what I've been doing since starting the podcast is just tell some stories. If we get into rabbit holes, that's fine. But I just like hearing people's stories, successful or unsuccessful. So you want to talk a little bit about moving to a new area. I'm sure you've hunted that area you're at now before you moving there, but um, just a little bit about hunting a new area, trying to figure yourself out in a new spot. That versus traveling to Minnesota back to Wisconsin, somewhere you're very familiar with, and just kind of that how that's been, what you've
Yeah.
kinda done that way, and then you can transition, and we can talk about, the couple tags you filled and kinda all that went into those hunts, and you can be
Yeah.
as long-winded as you'd like. I'll cut in when I think I need to, if we need to steer it one way or the other, but you
Okay.
can start where you want and go from there.
Sounds good. Yeah. My name's Dylan. I'm a resident in Iowa, I guess. I grew up in the great state of Wisconsin, so I don't really like to admit that I live in Iowa because, I'll still forever be a Badger, I guess. But moved over here for hunting. Obviously, being an Iowa resident has a lot of perks. And then I'm really not far from where I grew up at all. Like, it's a real short drive. So I can hunt Iowa and hunt Wisconsin every year. I've got Minnesota's real close to me if I want to jump up there and hunt and stay close to home. And, I'm no stranger, I guess, to travel hunting. So that's kind of always on the docket too. But yeah, live in Iowa. I own a media production business. So most of my work, I guess, comes from filming and producing hunting content for brands. Usually, a lot of it has to do with like product marketing for their companies. So a little bit of that, a little bit of weddings, some real estate stuff, different things like that. But it's nice. I can kind of make my own schedule, work really hard, when I want to, and then hopefully be able to take off time when I want to too, and not have to answer to anybody's schedules. So, yeah, I'm in my upper 20s, so starting to feel a little weird here, getting close to 30.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm starting to also kind of feel like I'm getting a little bit of experience, I guess, with how much time I spend in the woods that I really felt this year for the first time like I was kind of really making some educated decisions for just solely based off I guess experience, whereas before I guess I kind of felt like I had a good woodsmanship sense. I mean, I'm definitely not the best woodsman that I know. I've got a lot of room to grow. I'm not saying that, but before I guess early 20s and just up until the last few years, I kind of just felt like I could read sign really well, but I had a hard time like understanding, I guess, exactly what was going on or kind of guessing what was going on based off of it. And now I'm kind of getting to the point. I don't know if it's like age and time in the woods. I'm guessing where it's starting to click a little bit easier.
The terrain's pretty similar from where you grew up, correct?
Yeah, yeah,
So
it's
it's
exactly the same.
so transitioning from kind of the, less hard lessons learned and just being out in the woods,
Mm-hmm.
a lot of the year, I feel like it's probably a little bit easier of a transition. I mean, you're not super far from
Yeah.
where you grew up, but it may be a little bit even higher deer population. At least the last time I was there, it seemed like that's one thing that Iowa has going for it is it's not necessarily everybody thinks Iowa's just as soon as you cross the border, it's just unbelievable and you
Mm-hmm.
can't go wrong. There's huge deer behind every tree, which I mean, if you look at the bigger picture, it is better than some states, but it's not like you're so far away that it's not. But
Yeah.
from what I
No, for
noticed, the biggest thing was maybe more deer, and everybody there
yeah.
is still on the same page as far as management goes.
Yeah, I agree. I think the a couple big things, I guess. So you're completely right. It's not like I went from like hill country to marsh or swamps to hill country or whatever, Midwest to plains or something like that. Nothing crazy. It was extremely similar. I'd say the biggest things in Iowa, yeah, you got a little bit higher deer numbers, I would say. I don't think overall like the deer per square mile is different, but just probably
Mm,
more deer that hang out on public land, I would think. And then the biggest thing in Iowa that really threw me for a loop versus like Wisconsin or Minnesota is they make everything like super easy to it's like very accessible. Like you'll try to go in from one parking lot and think you're getting way away, and then all of a sudden you look at your Onyx and realize that you're closer to another parking lot than the one that you started at. So finding like overlooked or unpressured spots, especially with like e-bikes are legal here, so there's like a lot of e-bikers. So kind of putting in a lot of legwork isn't always the key, I guess, and I've had to learn that the hard way because usually I'm the type of guy that like I'm always looking at the back of a property or like an overlook corner or something like that. So that was kind of probably the biggest challenges, but yeah, terrain, habitat wise, the way that the deer are going to behave in the woods, it was all very, very similar. So,
yeah.
yeah, no huge curveballs for there.
Yeah, it's something that was a weird thing for me, how well the management of properties as far as the access, like, there's
Mm-hmm.
trails to every square inch. Essentially,
Mm-hmm.
there's some big chunks of property, but it's not like most of it is inaccessible. Um, there's a lot more areas here, I feel like, that are, like, with the bluffs and how steep things are,
Mm-hmm.
like, areas where people don't get to, where there's not trails or they're very old or not maintained. So yeah, you almost have to look at it like, what is everybody else doing? And I probably should do something different. And it
Right.
just feels weird. There's a transition period to where like you feel like you're doing something very wrong until it starts working.
Mm-hmm.
I kind of am in the same position in my hunting career, I think, to where like the first few years you really getting out there and putting time in and like reading
Mm-hmm.
sign, like you can get good at that, but it's just getting okay with unusual things and like things that you learned when you were younger when you didn't really know what you were doing or people were telling you were right that weren't
Mm-hmm.
very successful, kind of trying to like retrain yourself to do something a little bit different.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. And I think like reading, rub line or trails or any, the obvious saddles or, name any, I guess, big buzzword that that stuff's like super easy to learn and really get a hold on, but more predicting, if you find a rub line or you find a track, big track on a trail, and, you know, he might have left that there last night, but it's not like he's not going to repeat that this night or what. You just know that there's a big deer in the area, and more so just kind of predicting like what he's going to try to do that day, I think is like a really big thing that starts to separate people. And a lot of that is probably experience. And just getting better in the woods over time.
Yeah, I think that's very true because when you're first starting out, I think you learn how to hunt all these terrain features. I'm a very OCD person to where if I find something that I can't do well, I really hammer that like for a whole
Hmm.
season until I either get better at it or screw something up or be successful that way. Put that in my back pocket. So it's either
Hmm.
really going to work or really not going to work. So
Hmm.
then a handful of years down the road, once you cross off the things that don't work very well, just kind of stacking those years of experience, being okay with doing something that you never would have thought would be a great idea.
Hmm.
Um, you said you filled your buck tag in Iowa this year with your bow, correct?
Yes, correct.
Why don't you start from like if you have years of experience with the deer, if you want to get in a little bit, if you had any history or how you went
Hmm.
about scouting the spot you ended up in, or how you kind of started your season off.
Okay. Yeah. So, to me, like every year that I look back, every season begins like on the off season, spring scouting and summer scouting. And so, this last fall, 2024 was my first fall being an Iowa resident. And I never hunted this area of Iowa before. And so, I really was just kind of not really deep diving on anything. I was kind of staying real loose, open, just scouting a bunch of properties. And I don't think I was like as detailed as I was like the last year I was in Wisconsin or like as I was this year. So then transitioning this year, kind of once I got a better feel of like just odds and ends thing, pressure. There's a lot of things where like I was really good, but um, there's some stuff that'll surprise you, your first year being here. So got a good handle kind of, I guess, on an overall thought of this area, and then started to really deep dive on some properties this off season. Found some ways, I guess, that was like a little bit better to get away from pressure, maybe a little bit better to predict, where some better hunting would be. And then when I was scouting a property this summer, I'd got done scouting a different piece and then was driving around with a spotting scope, checking bean fields with like the last hour of light. And I found an absolute giant deer. And he was probably 400 or 500 yards away from public. Um, and so, yeah, glassed him and, um, kind of back up, I guess last year I killed a buck on Halloween night. And I had a little bit of like the rest of November, even though I was like back in Wisconsin and hunting over there. My one of my best friends, Tony, he had drew his tag here, and it was really cool to be able to hunt, with him and bounce stuff off each other of like what we were both seeing in Iowa, and then he just had like a crazy November. And I kind of felt like I was like, outside the window looking in. And
Yeah.
I just was so excited, I guess, to experience a rut in Iowa my first year being a resident, and then I shoot a deer on like my fourth sit here. Really hadn't really gotten into the heart of the rut yet. So this year, I guess I was really wanting to be a little bit pickier, I guess, of just like not so much with the deer, like, well, a little bit, but just I wanted to spend some time in the tree in November. Had a lot of stuff, as we all do in life, going on where I just kind of wanted to go out in the woods and just relax and just be out there and enjoy it. And so when I found that big deer, and then I had found a couple too that were real nice, but I'd found that one, I'd kind of had it in the back of my head that I really, really wanted to go after that deer. And I thought it'd be a pretty good excuse to, you know, if you're going after one deer, it's probably, especially on public, it's going to be a very hard task to accomplish. So
Yeah.
I knew I'd be spending a lot of time in the tree going after him. So that's kind of what I did. He lived on the private um, next door, as best I can tell. And then, but the way that area is set up, I knew that he would cruise onto the public eventually, and I just had to bide my time. And so it was like a ton of all day sits all in November. I did have three really close encounters with him. One, he was, I heard like a little, like a nubbin buck, a yearling buck, how they make that little like, that little
Yeah.
grunt type thing.
Almost
So
like
I heard,
sometimes you even hear does do it. It's just
yeah, exactly.
almost like a
Yep.
immature or just a generic grunt. You know, it's not, if anything, a
Yep.
small buck. Yeah.
100%. Yep. So I was on a point of a ridge and it drops off real steep on either side. And I really wanted that because with the wind that we had, I was trying to blow my wind off of I literally climbed up a cliff to get there, and my wind was supposed to be blowing straight off over that cliff. It was like a real gusty type of a day. Every day that I've had that's real gusty and has a lot of sun, the wind just tends to swirl really bad. Um, and in that spot, I think a little bit of it was like a thermal updraft, but also when it's real gusty like that, I feel like before you get a big gust, it'll kind of swell like the opposite way of the wind direction, and then it'll just come blowing through. And then
Hmm.
at the end of it, it kind of tumbles. It's just like a wave. If you see like
Yeah.
waves on a beach, it goes way back and then comes crashing through and tumbles. And so anyway, I heard that little grunt and I looked over my left shoulder, and here was his rack coming up over that real steep like side hill onto the flat with me. He was coming down a trail that would have put him broadside at 7 yards, and I'd had a younger buck below me that morning that hung out for a while, but eventually caught me when the wind swirled like that. So I had it in the back of my head that I cannot let him get right here for a perfect shot. Like I need to just shoot him as soon as I can, and grab the bow. He was coming, uphill, facing right at me, so I knew I wouldn't really be able to draw until his head was behind a tree. He had to take a couple more steps. His head would have been a big behind a big gnarly white oak, and the wind swirled. He caught me and took off. He was at probably like 22, 23 yards. So that one burned a little bit, and then I had another encounter with him that night, and then the next night after that. The next night he was right underneath me, but it was after legal shooting lights, so I was just sitting in my stand waiting for him to leave. So yeah, some pretty close encounters with him. Super grateful to spend time in the woods with a deer like that and get to see a deer like that. And then once we got to Wisconsin gun season, opening weekend, I spent that with my family, shot a buck, and I knew if I had not killed a deer in Iowa by then, I need to just kind of take the gloves off, go back to what I was used to doing, and that's like being real mobile, doing a ton of scouting and just kind of bouncing around a lot. And so that's what I did. Hunted opening weekend in Wisconsin, came back to Iowa, and the deer that I ended up shooting, I had no history. It was my first time on that piece of public, and I'd looked at it on a map for 2 years. Had really, really wanted to check it out, but just gotten hung up, hunting other
Hmm.
properties that I liked, and just never quite made it over there. And I was actually headed to a different property and was kind of looking at Onyx as I was headed there. And I was like, you know what? This property is on my way. I've been wanting to look at it for forever. I should really go check that out. And so I was just literally had my binos and my bow, nothing else, and was just kind of sneaking around the property. We've had quite a bit of snow. So I was reading tracks and just kind of looking at sign. And I ended up spotting the deer bedded next to a river. I was kind of way up on a side hill, and I knew he was bedded with the wind coming over the land. So he was kind of facing into the wind, and then he had the river at his back, and set up perfect for a buck to be bedded there like that. But um, also, it gave me a really clean, easy access. All I had to do was figure out a way to cross the river get on the opposite bank and then just kind of sneak down the bank.
Mhm.
And then I got to 40 yards, and then um, I had a tree that I wanted to get to as I was kind of planning this approach, and it was this tiny little tree on the edge of the riverbank, and that was my last little bit of cover. And I thought maybe if I could get there, I could grunt or do something to get him curious enough to at least come check it out. And as I got there, I realized there was a broke off licking branch on that tree. And so I assumed, under the snow, that was probably a big scrape right there. And it worked out perfect. So I was like super confident then to call, because I'm like, he's going to 100% believe there's another buck here working this scrape.
Mhm.
And I got to the tree, got set up on the ground, grunted real short, and then he looked my way for a long time in his bed. I could just see the top of his rack. And when he went to look away, I kind of reached over and snapped a branch on that tree. And then he stood up and was looking at me for what seemed like forever. And he thought he heard something behind him, I think, because he snapped his head straight behind him real quick.
Yeah.
And as soon as we broke eye contact, I gave him another just quick, short little, and he turned his head right back around, stared at me, and then flicked his tail and came right up and gave me a 20-yard shot broadside. And yeah, that was the end of my Iowa archery season, I guess. So it was kind of neat. I guess I got to experience a full season of or bow hunting and took it right down to the wire. And
Yeah.
then to kill one off the ground in late season, after all the rutcation pressure and these bucks being so worn down from the rut, just to
Yeah.
kill one in the snow and the cold, it was probably my favorite hunt that I've done.
Yeah.
It was
And
pretty wild.
it doesn't always seem like that's kinda how it goes when you're having a rough year and you're hunting the
Hmm.
same handful of properties or the same handful of deer, and then it gets to the point where you're just physically and mentally exhausted, and you're like, "What do
Hmm.
you do?" And then you kinda just all caution to the wind, "I'm gonna go bounce around and just put on miles and stuff." And then that same thing I've had happen before where it's like, "I didn't ever plan on hunting here, I never really put too much thought on it." You just hop in there, you either find something to set up on or like you did, spot a deer and throw a hunt
Hmm.
at it, and then that turns out to just be hot right then for a few days if it's during the rut, or
Yep.
you just find this little pocket of deer where you're just like, "All right, this is as good as I've been on lately." You put a little time in there, and then it happens.
Yeah,
Because I think
for
a lot
sure.
of people get married to, like, the same handful of spots, and you can't do that
Hmm.
on public. There's hardly any spots where you can find that you can, like, have to yourself for multiple years in a row. Not just that, because of, like, people being have way more access to, mapping and, like, figuring out good spots, and people are learning that that's how you kinda are successful, is to just
Yep.
find new areas. Like, it's so hard
Yep.
now to find a spot to yourself, and it's never gonna happen more than 1 year, so you can't take that for granted. You kinda have to be okay with just taking it all in. Like, you kill a nice deer on public and say, "Okay, I killed him here this year. The odds I'm gonna be able to come back to this very spot next year and be successful, or even the same property, and it be the same as it
Yep.
was this year, just is not very likely."
Yep.
And just getting over that mental block of, "This is the only time I'm ever gonna kill a deer here, even though it looks
Yeah.
so good or it worked out great this time," and not let that affect, you know, future plans too much.
Y Yeah, for sure. Usually when I find good spots, I would say that it's like there's 2 situations. There's either like an overlooked spot that's closer to access that just a deer's surviving there, and the only reason that it is because people just probably can't believe that one's actually living right there. And then the other one is like a hard to get to spot that just isn't getting the pressure yet. Um, I think those overlooked spots are a lot more hit or miss as far as year to year, because all it takes is like one guy to maybe doesn't know anything about that property and goes in there for a short hunt and just ends up stumbling upon that because he didn't have time to get way to the back or whatever. Somebody ends up
Mhm,
finding it, and then that spot will burn out really quick. And then the other ones, sometimes you can throw, a few years at them, it seems like, before it kind of tapers off. But it does seem like those ones really come in waves where, like, for a few years it might be really good, and then it might kind of suck for a few years, and then it'll start to rebound. And I think all that is just like, it's something hard to access, People aren't getting to it, but then those good years, there's obviously going to be big deer in there leaving a lot of sign, and then it's just a matter of time before more and more people find that sign and run cameras and end up finding that it's a good spot, and then it gets a lot of pressure, and
Yeah.
then that pressure makes it bad, and it's just kind of a revolving, wave of that, I think.
Yeah, and I think there's so many different factors to where it seems like when you look at pressure, maybe out of state pressure, I think is the most
Hmm.
predictable out of anything because you can pretty well tell where people that have a short period to hunt are going to go to the obvious terrain features or the
Hmm.
obvious food source or something. If they're only there for a handful of days, like you can kind of predict where off of this access that it's easy to access because they don't have a lot of time, or this food source is hot right now, or these different like rut terrain features that people key in on that time of year where it's those guys that live in that area. That's why, like you're talking about moving to a new area, you figure out those spots where maybe that week long rutcation pressure is not hitting. You find those
Yeah.
spots and you can kind of take advantage of those areas before they get that pressure earlier in the year. Um, and a lot of them you kind of touched on a little bit, like food source pressure year to year could be different,
Hmm.
whether that's oaks or standing corn versus beans where there's just a dirt field for a majority of the year, things
Right.
like that, that year to year, it seems like it comes in waves.
Yep.
Like every 5 years, it'll be good once these conditions set up and just taking that little bit of time to think, okay, I hit it right this year. It's probably not going to be good this time of year for another 5 years based on whatever of those factors we just talked about.
For sure.
Um, but yeah, that's
Yeah,
definitely something.
the one thing over here that'll throw you for a loop a little bit with that non-resident pressure too is it seems like there is guys that draw their tag, as like a individual, but there's also a lot of pressure of friend groups or families that, they all put in as a group. So when they draw, they have five guys that are coming down in a group, and they all tend to like, kind of team up and hunt maybe like a few properties. Like they come in, they scout, they find two, three properties that they really like, and then that's where they'll spend their entire, week of vacation or, 9, 10 days of vacation. And the property I was hunting that big buck on this year, that was kind of a prime example. There was a group of guys from Wisconsin, real good dudes that they I guess have been hunting Iowa since like 2007 or something like that. So they've got a lot of experience over the years of like coming, here, and they knew some really good properties, and it was fun to talk to them. And but yeah, those like three properties that those guys were hunting, there was, a lot of pressure because all of a sudden you have five e-bikes just whizzing back to every good spot that they know of. But then next year, that pressure could be totally different because you don't have those same groups,
You
you
don't have
know.
them drawing that tag. You have a couple years before they
Right,
draw it again to where those spots will have a
right.
couple of less
Yep.
pressured years. Yeah, for sure.
Yep, there was one of my buddies that drew his tag here last year. He found a couple places that he liked a lot during summer scouting. Like he was on some giants there, and even during the early season, they were still kind of hanging out. But then it just got hammered like late October and November, and then this year, we found out by talking to a different guy that's a local that was hunting up in that area that it was almost like a ghost town up there during late October in the rut. Like, so just a totally different situation. And that's probably a lot of what it was just different non-resident groups, hunting different areas.
Yeah, I that brings up a really good point too because I had that same thing happen this year to where there's a spot where I have limited access from a property owner to get into a certain corner of a public piece that's very inaccessible
Mm,
unless you go like the long way from the very other end.
mm-hmm.
And it's not easy. So there's not as many people that come in to that corner, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
And it's me and one other guy that has permission, but he usually only hunts, takes his week off of work and hunts the first week in November every year. So other than that week, I'm the only one that gets to access this spot essentially or park there. Um, and other than squirrel hunting pressure, you know how that is around here. Like
Yeah.
that's another something I don't even want to get into because it irritates me so
Yeah.
much.
Yeah.
Um, but anyways, other than that, which is mostly weekend stuff, from what I've seen, um, it I was in contact with him. I got his information from the landowner just so I could kind of keep in contact. Like, way when like I'm hunting these days, like I'll leave it alone. Like you can have it for this week because I know he only gets a week to hunt. So I was like trying to just keep in communication just so we were kind of on the same page. Like, oh, I've been seeing
Mhm.
this here. Like, go ahead, kind of thing. And I knew he was going to be in there that week. So I hunted it like a day or two prior to him coming just in case it was good before then to kind of get a couple good hunts out of it. Wasn't really that great. Um, and then kind of let him know that. And then he told me that he was having because he had success there the year prior
Okay.
that week. So he invited 3 or 4 friends, like, "Hey, this area
Mm.
is good, like, let's hit this for this week. It was good last year." So, I knew that area because his buddies weren't gonna hunt right on top of him, they were gonna hunt adjacent properties. So, I'm like, "I'm just gonna avoid that area, period, for that week," 'cause
Mhm.
that's just them, which it
Yep.
was only him last year, and there was other guys besides him, so I'm like, "It's gonna get pretty pressured, so I'm gonna just avoid that area." And then I ended up killing my best archery buck this year just for that reason. The
Yep.
couple of properties that I was very familiar with that I knew I could probably get on a nice deer, or at least that time of year, it was pretty good. Just like you talked about, just hop into somewhere brand new, getting in a spot where you just don't think anybody else is going to go, climbed a steep bluff in the morning, never been in there before, and 20 minutes later, after the sun comes up, kill a really nice deer. Like you
Nice.
just things that you don't it's not predictable. I couldn't
Yeah.
have told you prior to the year that I'd ever hunt that property that I did. Never looked at it before. It's just it's just how it goes. Sometimes you just gotta rely on what you know, the intel you have of the surrounding area and kind of hunt people more than you do a deer, I guess. Because
Yeah.
in this area of the Midwest, like, it's just I can't complain. People, kinda nitpick, this could be better, that could be better, but just in general, the Midwest, like, growing up here, being an outdoorsman, I'm pretty spoiled when you kinda take a step back and look at it. The
Yeah.
deer hunting's great. The turkey hunting's good. I think it could be probably better, but it's not bad. Everything like we talked about earlier. But,
Yeah, for sure.
um, so I guess you said you killed a Iowa buck last year too?
I did,
But it
yes.
was early in the year.
Yeah, it was Halloween night. Yep.
Okay. I guess that's not crazy early.
Not crazy early. It's like when I'm in Wisconsin, that really feels like middle of the season, just because
Yeah.
that opens in middle of September, but then Iowa opening like October 1st, you just kind of feel like you're a little bit, like that's almost still kind of early in the season for you, I guess.
Yeah.
But yeah.
It is weird too how, like, it opened like, Iowa opens October 1st, you feel like coming from someplace like this where it opens earlier, you feel like you're in middle of the season. It's just weird. It's a
Yeah.
weird feeling.
Yeah,
Um,
for sure.
but have you seen many differences as far as rut time frame? Everybody thinks first week in November is, great. Ha What's your experience been?
The only thing with Iowa in my experience is that uh when you have such a population or such a, I guess I don't even know how to say it, but you have so many people that drew their tag that are only going to draw this once every, you know,
Yeah,
if they're lucky 3 years, if 4 or 5 years. And most of those guys want to hunt the rut in Iowa, and I don't blame them. That's what I'd be doing too.
yeah.
But so you've got just this massive influx of people that are all like this year, November 1st fell on a Saturday, you know? So like
You know that's
everybody
when
took,
The
Yeah,
first day of the
everybody took
rutcation
that
is gonna be that
Monday
day.
through Friday off, and you could hunt November 1st through like November 8th or 9th, whatever that next Sunday was. I mean, that'd be like a dream, season if you drew it this year. That's like perfect dates.
Yeah,
And so there was a ton of people. November 1st, I don't remember what I had going on, but oh, I had kind of a rodeo of a situation where uh I was leaving for a hunt. It was like October 23rd or 24th. I had to leave the next day to go film a hunt in Illinois. And I'd kayaked back into the spot that I kind of wanted to scout and then hunt. Well, the river there was so low this year that I was like going over rocky little rapids and stuff, and it was just a pain in the butt. Like I was dead calm. Here my kayak is just clanking off of rocks the whole way down the river. And there's a couple times where I about flipped it because I'd go like the river would narrow down to basically only like a kayak width, and you'd out of all this water just shooting through this little tunnel. And so I'd come zipping through that thing, and then there'd be a big rock on the other side, and there's a couple times I got turned a little bit sideways going through that thing pretty fast, and I'd hit that
yeah,
rock. And yeah, it was crazy. But I ended up knowing that like there's no way I really want to go the rest of the way down this river after dark, after that evening hunt. And so I just pulled the kayak up and stashed it in this real brushy spot and just said I'll just come get this after I get home from filming. So I went there to get it November 1st, and I kind of figured that using that kayak to get back into where I wanted to get to that day, hopefully that would get me away from this Saturday pressure of no, I just figured it was going to be stupid. Well,
yeah,
it was crazy. Apparently, everybody else that was in the parking lot that morning had the exact same idea because I'm getting headlamps flashing at me the whole way down the river and like the ridge and CRP field I eventually wanted to get to. There's headlamps all over it. And I was like, dude, I should have just hunted by the truck this morning. Like there was
yeah,
nobody up there, you know? But yeah, so anyway, like I said, there was a crazy amount of pressure that opening weekend. So that's getting back to your question. That's a little bit of a thing where I feel like the pressure here is way more intense for like a real short period of time, and it's really that first week in November type time frame.
yeah,
But then also a really nice thing growing up in Wisconsin, you have opening weekend of rifle starts anywhere from like that November 16, 17, all the way to like maybe the 22nd, 23rd, just depending on the year.
yeah,
And so really, I mean, the rut, if there was no hunting, the rut would still be going on right then. Um, in Wisconsin, it'll still happen a little bit, but I mean, as well as I do, you can really tell the difference of
yeah.
rifle season
By
rut
then,
type stuff,
at least the mature bucks at that point, by the time rifle season starts at the tail end of November, it's been even bleeding into the last few years into December. Mature bucks are just so run down. I don't think they're moving a ton. You see a lot of little
Yeah,
bucks activity and does kind of like after they've been bred, kind of like all grouping back up, hitting food
yeah,
sources. Like you see a lot of immature bucks and does, and the big ones might still be out searching, and the rut stuff might be happening. But at that
hmm,
point, they're still searching for that rare doe that hasn't been bred
yeah,
yet, or
yeah,
you know, and they're just like laying low, and you just don't see them. They're just so run
yeah.
down for running for a month.
Well, that's the thing is it seems like that behavior is pretty similar in Iowa. But like that pressure seems like it groups all those deer up and just kind of it turns them off just a little bit. But then you'll see like if you're on cameras or anything, you'll still see that rut stuff going on at night, or maybe if you've got some big private pieces next door to the public where
Yep.
it'll kind of continue over there when those deer get bumped off. And you really don't, Iowa, their first shotgun this year opened December 6th.
Yep.
So it's nice, this year I had a tag for so long I could kind of experience like that later little trickle of rut at the end of the month. So that's kind of a big difference. Personally, I don't know. I've had some guys reach out and ask like if you were to come to Iowa and you had a week's worth of vacation, what time are you going to do it? And
That your
I
answer is gonna
really
be a
don't.
lot different than someone else that doesn't live there and
Yeah.
know. It's your
Yeah,
answer is gonna be different than most
it
probably.
It's tough. I mean, because you're gonna deal like it's still Iowa, it's still the Midwest rut, so you're still gonna have you know, if you know how to hunt the hills in this area, you're still gonna have some like really fun hunts if you come here that first week of November. So I hate to not tell guys that because it's still really cool. But then if you get like you know, you come that last week of October, it can be like this year. If I wasn't filming that last week of October, that big deer I was going after would probably be dead right now because he just went stupid. Like we had some really great weather,
Yep.
and he was running like crazy. And so if you've got years like that, or even like that, my favorite time to hunt would be like November 10th through the 17th. And
I'm
I don't think you're gonna.
100%. I'm 100%. Like I killed mine
Yeah.
on the 8th this year, but I would
Yep.
say from that 7th to the 15th, like that
Yeah.
week, those 7 days,
Yeah.
from my experience, that has been the best 7 days that
Yep.
of activity, mature buck
Yep.
activity, the last 3 to 5 years for me, at least.
Honestly, dude, if I had to pick 4 days, I would really say November 15th through the 19th might be my favorite, like 4 days, because it's not, you're not going to see a ton of deer, but those 4 days every year from either being in the woods or having cameras out is when I just see like these just crazy giant deer that like you may never see again. You might only ever see them once, but they're just making those like late rut
Yep. And
marches.
I think a lot to do with that. I don't wanna get too, like, conspiracy theory, off the wall, but something that makes sense to me is those handful of days that week prior to the rifle season, everybody is coming in to maybe properties that haven't been hunted all year where these deer are living, going,
Mm-hmm.
putting their cameras, they're getting their stands ready for rifle season. They're making all this commotion, and they're bumping these making these deer move. If you find the right spot, could he get you an opportunity, especially if you're I think if you're hunting a specific big deer, you were talking about, like, you're on, and you just
Mm-hmm.
can't figure it out, if you could kinda dial it in and be ready for that to happen, and you
Yeah.
hadn't filled your tag by then, before everybody kinda bumps the deer around, like, that I feel like those couple days prior to that that's why they pop up on camera and you see them all of a sudden because 'cause they're having to move or
Yeah.
vacating where they're living, and that's at least my
Yeah.
opinion.
I agree. I think that's probably got a ton to do with it. I think it's also just the fact of like they went through such a like those dominant bucks in an area, they can just go from doe to doe when they're all like when the tip of the bell curve when most of the does are in heat, they lose a doe. Literally all they have to do that night is just run up to the nearest ag field, go walk around. Oh, there's one in heat. Even if she's got a buck with her, he's probably the dominant buck in the area, and he's gonna boot that one off,
Yep.
and he's got his next doe, and they can just do that like so fast. And then when that time comes, they're all of a sudden just like they don't have that availability of does, just all of them in heat. And so it seems like they're just putting on some miles. Like that's
Yep.
the time of the year when you just hear that just consistent march. You know, it's not like a scatter frenzy type, you know, movement like you see the first week of November. It's just like a steady, just and
Yeah.
you get that glazed over look and just a beat up old bruiser buck just marching around. And
I think
um,
I think it can go both ways too, like, I think that happens in an area where your ratio of does to bucks is a little more even.
mhm,
I think a lot of people who say they have this property, they manage it for, a high deer population, they don't really kinda think about, whether they have mature bucks versus how many immature does, like, really break it down too much, they just want a
mm,
lot of deer. So they
mhm,
set up their property with good food, good bedding, but it's mostly good for does. And if there's 20 does to 1 mature buck, like you
yeah,
were talking about during that peak breeding, like, I
mhm,
would think at least a handful or half of those does are gonna be in heat within a few days of each other. I've seen it a lot in those properties like that where the ratio is way out of skew, even northern Wisconsin, like, where
mhm,
that ratio is a little bit more off, that those mature bucks just hole up in a thick area where you can't get to them, and the does come
mhm.
to them. That
Oh
doe
yeah,
wants to be bred. It's like humans, like, that girl wants to go to that one stud.
mhm.
That's just the way it goes. The does are gonna go to him. He could just lay there all day, and he's just like, "Oh, here comes another one." They're not dumb. They don't wanna pass their genes on to some little, scrub buck. Like, if
Mhm.
so, I've seen that too, where that's why a lot of guys have these good properties and hunt in one area, if it's set up wrong, or they're wondering why they call it like the lockdown phase of the rut, because that buck's just staying put and everything's kind of
Mhm.
running through him. That's why they're not seeing
Yeah.
that activity.
Yeah. And usually that time they've got like one or two spots where they know that they really like to take a doe and heat. Like typically from what I've seen, it's a spot that's kind of off the wall. It doesn't really set up well for, a really it doesn't set up well for a lot of deer to be there, but it sets up for them to be like isolated and it's easy for him to defend her against other deer. And he's just gonna probably have a doe there for a couple days while she's in heat or close to in heat, and then he's gonna lose her, and then he's gonna go get another one, or like you said, maybe they'll come to him, and he's just gonna have that one or two pockets where he's just gonna hang out for a long time, and then it doesn't seem like they really break that little pocket until they either get bumped or the that availability of does and heat goes down, and then yeah, that's
Yeah.
when you just see that cruising.
Yeah, and I actually found a spot like that. It kinda makes sense. Like, this 2 weeks ago, I pulled some of my cameras I had out all year, my soakers, and I was kinda just like, that's when I find a lot of new spots, is when it has nothing to do with this year. I'm going to pull a camera, and then I just, like, take a weird loop back to the truck where I would never go. I found this spot next to this, it's pretty thick, like, tag alder, like, it's got a river, but it's, like, super wet,
Mm,
super thick, where to hunt next to the river would be pretty miserable, or, like, people just aren't going in there. And I remember this, that it's probably 4 or 5 years ago, one of my buddies called me on, like, November 5th or 6th. He was pheasant hunting near there, and he's like, "This giant buck's pushed down into this, next to the river with a doe."
mhm,
And he's just
mhm,
watching them during that peak rut time. And then I walked through that little corner, 'cause I had a camera up, like, on a ditch crossing up in the hills from there. So I'm just gonna
mhm.
go walk down there where he said he seen that buck a couple years ago and just look. And I mean, that little corner pocket in that, like, oxbow of the river was just tore up. You
Yeah,
could tell the multiple bucks were here, and there was a hot doe down here pushed up against this river. That made sense when you looked at it, and you're like, "Yeah, this looks like an area, like, nobody's going in there
yep,
to bump them out of there." That's where those bucks take does, it looks like to me anyways. And, like, that's
yeah,
just, like, throw that in your head next year during that time frame. If you're striking out in your other spots, this would
yep,
be an area to at least check, or
yep,
inventory. Like,
for
that's
sure.
how you kinda find some spots, just checking
Yep,
out new areas you would never go.
yep, I agree.
Um, we talked about your bow buck. I don't know how eventful your rifle, Wisconsin buck is. It kinda like a just like family deer camp
Mhm,
kinda
yeah,
situation?
yeah, it's, basically my dad owns about 30 acres, and then my uncle owns close to 50 that butts right up next to it, so, dad and I hunt his 30, and usually we have a cousin that hunts with us, but he wasn't there this year. But we have our 3 stands. Really, only 2 of them are probably stands that we should sit in, but because we have
Yeah.
3 guys, we kinda force 1 more. And, we just go to our stands and sit there every year, and I haven't shot a buck there since I think I was in high school was the last one that I had shot, but, you know, uh usually, when I'm at the family place, I'm kinda letting a lot of small bucks go and just hoping for a doe or a nice buck, and so, I can't say it's not like I haven't seen, like, a ton of deer there over the year or whatever, it's just our property definitely gets the most pressure around, and then you've got, like, these, like, giant, couple 100-acre or more farms around that don't have a lot of pressure.
Mhm.
And, so it seems like we either get real lucky and we get some deer opening weekend, or the deer figured out pretty damn quick that like, hey, maybe we don't go over to that valley
Yeah.
because you're gonna get shot,
It it seems
Um,
like it seems like here during rifle season, it's always, you pretty much have opening day or the first
mm,
opening 2 days, and then after that, it's gets slim pickings. And that's not because
I
all the
was
deer die, I don't think. I think it's just because that influx of pressure, they just, like, hole up.
well, I even see it too where like, and maybe this is just our area, but um, I was always so jealous of a few friends that I had in high school that like they had these family places that were couple 100 acres or more of either hunting properties or farms that it either didn't get a lot of pressure or the pressure that it did get wasn't really pressure because the guys that were hunting there weren't going to shoot anything, literally anything, unless it was just a giant deer.
Yeah,
And so we'd hunt opening weekend. Maybe you'd get a deer, maybe you wouldn't. But like, I'd get crap from buddies for shooting a doe on opening day. They'd be like, "Oh, you shot a doe on opening? Like, what? Big buck's not going to come." I'm like, dude, I don't have the availability to like shoot a doe on Friday if I really
yeah,
want to. Like, I can't just go out and sit in my box blind and shoot a doe whenever I want, you
yeah.
know?
Mhm.
So you have a little bit of that where I think those deer definitely, they sense the pressure, and then usually what I see is like there's these properties that are really, really good during gun season, and it's probably just because there's a lot of pressure surrounding it. Those deer know that's a safer area, and they just kind of stack in those properties. Um, because you will see like I've got, like I said, several buddies that their properties stay like I could go in there and shoot a mature buck the whole 9-day gun season, you know. So it's just that's just kind of how it is. But yeah, there's not really a lot that went into it. I hunted Saturday, had a pretty good sit. And then Sunday I was sitting there and my uncle, who hunts just a little bit to the south of me, had shot at a doe and missed it. But we have walkie talkies, so if anybody shoots, we usually hop on the walkie talkie just to
Mhm.
check in. Does anybody need a hand, dragging or gutting, and just make sure everybody's okay, whatever. And he got on and said that he was gonna go make sure he didn't, see any blood or whatever, just to be, ethical. And I was like, well, there's a good chance maybe he'll bump something to me here. And pretty like within 5 minutes, this buck wrapped the ridge coming from his way,
Yeah,
and I'm about positive he bumped him. The deer wasn't really acting like he was bumped because he just kind of had his nose to the ground, just trotting along like he was, rut type behavior.
yeah,
But I mean, he just came from there, and my uncle just kind of walked up on the other side of the ridge. So I think he just got kind of lightly bumped, and I mean, 2 3-year-old bucks, so he just probably forgot about it real quick and was going back to trying to find a lady friend, I guess.
yeah.
And so yeah, anyway, I didn't think I was gonna be able to get a shot off. He was in some real thick stuff. I got my gun up and was waiting for him to get into a gap, and when he got into that gap, I hesitated because I could see a lot of stuff there, and then readjusted, found another one where I thought maybe he would run through, and got kind of ahead of him, waited for him to get in the crosshairs, and pulled the trigger, and down he went. So it was kind of it's just fun. It's special for me, I guess, to shoot one out at the family place because it doesn't happen much, and it's just the only time of the year I really get to spend time with my dad and my family in the woods.
Yeah,
So getting a buck down there and kind of sharing everybody's excitement is just it's a pretty special feeling, I guess. So
yeah,
yeah,
yeah, that seems like that's kinda how most of the successful hunts go during rifle season. It seems like my dad has killed a couple nice ones opening day, and he just kinda sits in a spot where he knows all the neighbors will bump deer to when they get in or out of their stand. That's how a lot
yep.
of people are successful, to be honest with you.
100%. Yeah.
Um,
Even like when I grew up, most of us hunted like ditch, like hub style I mean, it's like a thermal hub too, but it's also like a big hub of you've got all these different points that dump down into a main valley. So you got deer that could be getting bumped coming from a bunch of different directions. And honestly, if I was hunting public land, exclusively during like any high pressure time, whether it's like even sometimes during the first week of the rut or the first week of November during the rut, I think if you set up in an area like that where it's a good place to catch deer just traveling anyway, because you've got all these different options for them to come from, but also I've spent I don't even know how many sits going into spots, whether it's like opening weekend or whatever, where you think you're getting into this great spot because it's just the most secure bedding area or whatever, and it's going to get blown up anyway.
the sign's
Um,
huge. Like,
yeah,
it's
yeah,
they'll throw that
whatever. You
all out the
just
window, yeah.
Yeah, just throw it all out the window, in my opinion. Just throw it all out the window and go sit somewhere where it's like there's the most escape options coming through that little corridor right there, whatever it is.
Yeah.
That's honestly how I would rifle hunt.
And I think I can say this firsthand, you've been around a lot of big buck killers in your life.
Mm.
You've hunted with a lot of different people. I would say if you took a survey of the areas and the times of year that those deer are killed, you can throw out sitting over scrapes and sitting over big rub lines and all this great sign, like just sign in general. Like I would say a lot of those guys are hunting pressure. The guys that are successful on public land, they're basing
Mhm.
what they're hunting over and where they're hunting off of pressure from other people,
For
themselves,
sure.
their own pressure, their access. Those are the things they focus on. They're not focusing on there's this big signpost rub or this rub line or this community scrape. And all of a sudden a deer showing up over this scrape, and it's just not that easy. Like, I would say most people that are successful on public land consistently are they're based their whole approach off of pressure,
For sure.
if you ask them.
Yep. Yeah, for sure. I mean, whether it's hunting escape routes like that or just hunting where they think people aren't, just trying to find a pocket of deer that are stacked up, yeah, most of the guys I talk to, if you ask them to like look at a map or break down anything or, you know, anything about a hunt, their first answer is like, I thought I could get away from pressure over here, that these deer might be over here because of this access or whatever.
Yep. Yeah, for sure. Kind of like talking about like that pressure thing because I don't know, it's just ever changing. It sounds like your approach to moving to a new state in a new area, that's a lot of things you just have to learn is how it gets that area gets used from year to
Hmm.
year. It's like big picture. It's not like I'm just gonna go into this spot and find this good sign and sit there kind of thing. You could probably have success doing that, but breaking it down and having your approach based off of that, I think definitely a good way to go about it for sure. But
Yeah. Yeah, I definitely learned a lot, I guess, from my first year to this year, and hopefully I keep learning that much every year because you just kind of feel more dialed every year that you
yeah,
go. So, yeah.
it's not always the spot that looks good on on your Snapchats you're sending to your buddies and on a map. It's a lot of the times the spots you kill in are not flashy whatsoever. They're kind of just
Mhm.
like I've had the last couple deer I killed or the last couple I should say opportunities I've gotten the last 3 years when I have buddies come out like help me blood trail or like track a deer or whatever. They kind of look at where I was set up and like, look at me like, why the hell are you sitting? Like, what are you doing? And I'm
Yeah.
like, I don't know. I really can't tell you. It's just
Yeah.
something that with experience, I could see a big deer coming through here and it, it doesn't always look great.
Is there any like specific examples, I guess, you have of that, of like why, like maybe a spot that doesn't have a lot of sign, but like a reason that you were set up there and were successful or had a good encounter or anything?
I think it either comes down to pressure, like we were talking about pretty much this whole time. I would say that majority of the spots that I've had encounters with big deer or the spot like from this year that I killed in, there's not buck sign. Like you'd go there and you don't see rubs, you don't see scrapes. I think just hunting off a little ways, like
Mhm.
whether that's downwind 50, 60 yards of where you would, your brain automatically, when you get to that area where like there's a lot of deer coming through here, you kind of got to take it a step further and say, okay, this is where a majority of the deer are coming through. Where is that
Mhm.
big buck going to come through? And
Mhm.
then think about, well, is it because it's thicker there? Can he get a little bit of everything's wind coming out of sight
Mhm.
downwind? Like just,
Mhm.
or areas I've had success. Like this year, I hunted probably 12 to 15 days only during bow season. And I probably seen a nice buck 10 out of 15 times.
Wow. Yeah.
But the rate, I don't know what it is. If you told me to go fill a doe tag, I don't know if
Yeah.
what I would do because I've seen other than the hot doe that the buck was on that I killed this year on November 8th, I did not see one singular doe by itself that I could have shot like the whole
Wow.
year. I don't know what it is. The spots,
Yep.
it seems like just whether the ratio of bows to bucks are higher. But yeah, to answer your question, this year I focused on areas because I knew I'd get a lot of time where I knew that 7th through the 15th that it's during the rut where deer are just moving more. But focusing on areas just it makes sense for a big deer to have to come through there at some point that's easy for them, but
Mhm.
at the same time is overlooked by someone else. Like,
Mhm.
I almost avoid areas with a lot of scrapes or like a scrape line or a couple big rubs, something that someone accessing is gonna see that and sit right there. I just totally avoid that.
Yeah.
It's almost like Dan Infalt talks about, like, dating a fat chick. If
Yeah.
you've heard that analogy, that's
Yep, I've
100%
seen that.
correct. Like, just
Yeah.
do something that you think someone else is not gonna do, and base your whole approach off of intel that you've gotten from past years.
Mm,
Don't let a trail camera picture from this year that you got last night determine what you're gonna do. Just
sure.
take a step back and just big picture it and just yeah, I don't know.
Yeah.
It's my approach
Yeah.
anyway.
My same. I mean, my best couple of my best rut spots that I know of, there's not a ton of sign at the actual spot where I would kill a deer. Like there's a ton of sign like in the general area, you know?
Mhm,
But like the last buck that I killed in Wisconsin with a bow, there was like a hub and like kind of a long running valley coming out of it, and that whole valley and hub was just lit up with giant community scrapes and lots of rubs, you know, close to the ag and stuff like that. But where I ended up killing him was on this like tiny little point where I just thought it would be a good spot with the wind that we had that day, and I kind of accessed up the ditch, crawled up the hill, and I found this little sandy spot on the side of the hill where there wasn't like a lot of tracks, and like being in the sand, you couldn't really tell exactly what they were. You could just see like impressions that looked big or whatever. And I said, you know, there might not be a lot of deer right here, but this looks exactly like where a buck would want to cruise this with this wind.
yep,
And sure enough, like right at last light, a big buck hopped right on that trail and gave me like a 5 yard shot. So it's
yeah,
kind of that's kind of how I approach it. Is like a sign for me anymore is like just confirmation that there's good deer in the area, and then I'm kind of striking out to find like good spots to kill them after that.
yeah. Definitely my success rate of at least seeing deers and encounters has come from taking that approach to granted, I live here. I know I'm gonna be able to hunt this year after year, but having
Mm-hmm.
that approach, acting like it's a new state, new
Mm-hmm.
wiping the slate clean after every season, soaking cameras, and then pulling all those soaker cams at the end of the year, taking inventory. Okay, there was deer using this area for these 3 days. Log
Mm-hmm.
that. Go back, check it
Mm-hmm.
that time of year next year, and just building up your Rolodex of data and your historical dates and stuff like that, and just knowing, say, this area is hot for 5 days, and it has been for the last 3 years. Okay, that's no, I know where that's. I'm going to hunt that property those 5 days, but I don't know where. Don't get
Mm-hmm.
married to a spot, but a general area, and just kind
Yeah,
of pick it apart differently every year.
for sure.
And I've had success doing that for sure, taking
Yeah.
that approach. But it all comes back down to pressure. Like that
Yep.
makes everything change every year too. So
Yep.
there's
For
not
sure.
one cookie cutter answer to how to get on deer.
No.
One other thing that when you were talking, I kind of popped into my head and we'll end on it maybe, but especially in hill country, don't go into a spot and say, this looks good from a human perspective, especially how steep some of the areas are in hill
Mm-hmm.
country.
Mm-hmm.
Deer are like mountain goats around here. They will go in spots, especially when they're bumped up and down stuff that you would say, well, if I was a deer, I would go up to the head of this point and around the ditch because it's easy and it's easy for me to walk it. Well, they're kind of on the same page. They know where people are walking and what's easy for them. They're going to do the opposite. They will go in some very steep, steep spots. Don't
Mm-hmm.
overlook spots because they're steep and say, I'm not even going to look at that because I know I wouldn't go up and down that. So I know a deer's not going to. Those deer
Yeah.
have lived here their whole life. They're pretty acclimated to the terrain and the topography.
Yeah, for sure.
But yeah, that's pretty much. We talked a lot about some good stuff. I appreciate you hopping on and telling your stories and stuff. I know you kind of do a good job on your Instagram, updating people every once in a while, but you don't really get to, hearing it from the person that it happened to is nice to like get the whole story. I know, but I appreciate you hopping on. If you want to let people know where they can see or if people are looking for content work or whatever, like just shout your
Mm-hmm.
stuff out so people can find you.
Yeah, well, I appreciate you having me on, and I guess following my Instagram. My Instagram is just my first and last name, Dylan Hazen, and then underscore in season. My media company is in season media, so that's kind of why. And but yeah, I'd say I don't do a great job of consistently posting on there. It seems like I come in waves where like
Yeah,
I'll get real into it for a little while and then I just don't do it at all for a little while. But yeah, a lot of it will be like stories of me just screwing around scouting, and if I see something that I think is like helpful and I'm not like in the zone of like I'm really wanting to kill something right here close, I'll
yeah,
kind of screw around and throw a few things up. But yeah, some of my work is on there, and then also yeah, hunting content and that sort of thing. So once again, yeah, appreciate you having me on. I know we've kind of chatted over Instagram off and on the last few years a lot, so it's nice
yeah.
to kind of chat face to face.
Well, you're not too far away. We'll have to keep in touch during the year. I like finding people that are the same kind of terrain and bouncing ideas. I don't know what it is, but like when people you can just like bounce ideas off someone and get a different
Hmm.
perspective. It's like very helpful for me to hear
Yeah.
because you get so locked in during the season and I'm doing it my way. I got my system, but then like somebody says, "Oh, maybe try this," or like I would do that. I'm like, "Huh, why would they do that?" And just use that. So yeah, we'll be in touch. I appreciate you hopping on.
Sounds good, man. Thank you.